He sees the burden you carry alone because you don't want to bother anyone else. He sees the people who come against you. God sees. You may feel invisible, but you are not invisible to God. He knows what you're facing. He knows what you're going through. God sees. Have you ever felt invisible? Like nobody noticed your hurt, your pain, your struggles. You prayed, but it felt like no answer came. Maybe you even sat in church surrounded by people and wondered, does God even know what I'm going through? You might be there today. Trouble surrounds, people are lining up against you, you're trapped in a situation or circumstance where it seems like there's no way out. You've schemed and plotted, you tried to come up with a plan, but you're on empty. You feel alone, hopeless, forgotten. It's a horrible place to be. I understand, I've been there. I've cried the late night tears, I've prayed the desperate prayers, I've begged God for an answer. Here's my question. Does God hear you? Is there hope? Is there any chance? In the Old Testament story I want to look at with you, that's where the nation of Israel was. Egypt, the most powerful country in the world, had taken the Israelites captive, forced them into slave labor. Now, scholars disagree how long they were at slave labor. Some say 215 years, some say 400 years, some say 430 years. I'll tell you, for the purpose of our story, it doesn't really matter. Whether it was 215 years or 430 years, it's a long time. At least 4 generations of Israelites had been born in captivity, seemed their situation would never change, and I imagine they'd given up hope. This would be their destiny, their forever story, trafficked slaves. Maybe there were a few who still prayed for deliverance, but it appeared God had forgotten them long ago. And then enter a guy named Moses. And most people, even if you didn't grow up in church, you've heard of Moses. Moses was one of the most famous men of God in the Old Testament, but his journey wasn't completely smooth. It began well. God miraculously protected him from the Egyptian Pharaoh who was killing all the Hebrew babies. And as Moses grew, Moses was not content with the status quo. He knew something had to change. He wanted his people to be free. But in a fit of rage, he killed an Egyptian that was beating one of the Hebrew slaves, and Moses had to run for his life. He was destined to be the deliverer of his people, but now he found himself taking care of sheep in the middle of the desert. It was boring, it was frustrating, it was lonely, and he spent 40 years in that wilderness. 40 years of frustration, uselessness, just scraping to survive. And then one day, in one moment, everything changed. God let Moses know, and through him the Israelites, that they weren't forgotten, that God still had a plan and purpose for their lives. In a remote part of the desert, God appeared to Moses in a burning bush, spoke to him from the fire. That part of the story is really great. If you feel forgotten, invisible, and alone, tune in and listen close. Because in God's conversation with Moses, he revealed something that will encourage and give you hope. In just a few sentences, God revealed his heart, not just for Israel, but for you and me. We find that in Exodus chapter 3 and verse 7. The Lord said, I've indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers. I'm concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. The cry of the Israelites has reached me. I've seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. And I just want to slow down for a few minutes and look at that statement. The Israelites wondered if God had forgotten them. Maybe you've wondered that. But God said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. In your worst moment, when you feel like no one sees you, God sees you. He sees your sleepless nights. He sees the doctor's reports. He sees the betrayal that left you hurting. He sees the burden you carry alone because you don't want to bother anyone else. He sees the people who come against you. God sees. You may feel invisible, but you are not invisible to God. He knows what you're facing. He knows what you're going through. God sees. Next, God said, I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers. Prayer is not wasted. Even when it feels like your prayers are met with silence, heaven hears. He knows what you're going through. He knows what you're facing. Every tear is a prayer. Every sigh is noticed. Every whisper is heard. One of my favorite verses is found in the 139th Psalm. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. Were I to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand. God hears you. You're on his heart and mind. In fact, he's thinking about you so much, it outnumbers the grains of sand. So I wanted to get some kind of an idea of just how much that is. So last time I was at the beach, I sat down in the sand and I started counting. Do you have any idea how hard it is to count sand? So I gave up at like 1,000. And so I asked ChatGPT, since we all know that AI knows all, how many grains of sand are there in a 5-gallon bucket? It calculated the average size of a grain of sand. Then it calculated the volume of a 5-gallon bucket. Then it divided the bucket volume by volume per grain and gave me the answer. A 5-gallon bucket holds roughly 2.9 billion grains of fine beach sand. 1 5-gallon bucket. Now, a 1-mile beach contains somewhere around 4.25 million 5-gallon buckets of sand. If you multiply 4.25 billion by 4.25 million by 2.9 billion grains of sand, you get 12 quadrillion, 325 trillion grains of sand on 1 mile of one beach. Wait for it. There are approximately 50,000 miles of sandy coastline on our globe. If you add up all that sand, it is 616 quintillion, 250 quadrillion grains of sand. That's how much God is thinking about you. If you ever feel anonymous, that's a whole lot of zeros that let you know you matter to God. See, you think your prayers are hitting the ceiling, that no one's listening. God sees, God hears, and God knows. But God not only hears and knows, I want you to look what he said next to Moses. I am concerned about their suffering. God is not a cold, detached observer. He's not an absent landlord who wound up the world and then walked away. He's not too busy running the universe to notice you. The word used here for concerns means it carries the idea of being deeply moved, emotionally engaged, stirred with compassion. That means God doesn't just know about your pain, he feels your pain. Your tears are not ignored. Your broken nights and heavy mornings don't just get recorded in heaven like statistics. They touch him. They move the heart of God. The writer of Hebrews describes Jesus as a high priest who's touched by the feeling of our infirmities. That word touched means he sympathizes. He suffers with you. When you're wounded, he's not standing at some distance. When you hurt, he hurts. When you rejoice, he rejoices. God sees. God knows. And God cares. 1 Peter 5:7 says this way, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. So instead of letting despair rule your heart, cast your cares on him. Whisper one more prayer. Reach for hope one more time. Because God has not forgotten you. He cares about you. He's concerned for you. Verse 8 gets even better. So I have come down to rescue them. See, when God is concerned, God doesn't just feel, God acts. He rescues. God's compassion leads to rescue. His concern leads to intervention. His care leads to deliverance. Just as he stepped into Israel's suffering and delivered them from captivity, he'll step into your suffering. That's who he is. He is the God who comes down. Not the God who stays distant in heaven, but the God who enters your pain, walks into your mess, and shows up in your darkest hour. Just like the Israelites, your story is not over. What feels like the end is just the middle. The God who sees, the God who hears, the God who cares, is also the God who rescues. Don't believe the lie you've been forgotten. Don't carry the weight alone, because the same God who spoke to Moses is still speaking today. And he's saying, I've seen and I've heard. I know what you're facing. I'm concerned. I care. And I'm coming to your rescue. If you're suffering today, hear me close. You're not forgotten. God sees you. God hears you. God cares for you. And God is already at work to rescue you.